Hello students, a very good afternoon. So today we are going to have the first revision session on the chapter chemical control and integration, chemical coordination and integration. So before we start this topic, so let me launch a technical poll. Okay, so please let me know if my screen as well as the audio is clear. All right, students. So I'm going to end the poll now. If you have any technical issues, please put it in the chat box and we'll take care of it. Okay. So give me a second. Let me check on the live. Yes, perfect. Okay, so let's get back to our chapter. So where we start by understanding about chemical coordination and why chemical coordination is important and what are the different types of organs that is involved in endocrine system, what is the definition of hormones, okay, and what is the overall integration of human endocrine system, their secretions, deficiencies and functions. Okay, next we talk about hormones of heart, kidney and gastrointestinal tract. Even though they are not endocrine glands, they do a role in secretion, so we're going to talk about them. Next we will talk about mechanism of hormone action, like how hormones usually function. Okay, so let us get back to by understanding what is endocrine system. So before we understand what is endocrine system, so let us go back to our first control and coordination. We started talking about new nerve system, right? So when we talked about nerve system, we talked about how nerve system is very important for controlling the body functions and bringing integration between organs and tissues, etc., so that we work as one organism. When you compare it, when you see the factors of nerve system, what you understand is nerve system is very quicker and it is very faster rate of control and coordination. Whereas there are many parts in your body where your nerve system cannot integrate and cannot provide the necessary control over your cells and tissues. So if your cells have to divide, or if your cells have to grow or destroy themselves, okay, for all these things, it requires a more diverse and more elaborate control system, and that comes through chemical coordination. So in our body, all the chemical coordination is controlled by an elaborate and integrated system called as endocrine system. Okay, so what is endocrine system? Endocrine system consists of a very organized glands called as endocrine glands. So these endocrine glands are ductless glands. They do not have any ducts or pipes. Okay, or their secretion is released into the blood plasma, and usually through blood plasma your hormones will reach the desired destination. Okay, so what do they secrete? Endocrine system or endocrine organs, they secrete hormones. And what are hormones? Hormones are by definition non-nutrient chemicals, okay, that act as intracellular messengers. Okay, and see, when these hormones are produced, they actually act on the membranes of the cell, and then they create a message within the cell. Okay, thereby they communicate among the similar type of cells and create a intercellular messengers. Okay, so this is the function of hormone. And if you see the volume of hormones that are synthesized in our body, they're synthesized in a very low amount. So that is why they're called as trace elements, or they're also called as trace hormones. Okay, so this is about hormones. So when it comes to endocrine system, I told you endocrine system consists of a very elaborate network of endocrine glands. So here are the list of our endocrine glands, such as hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, thymus gland, adrenal gland, pancreas, and gonads. So when it comes to gonads, the testes in male and the ovary in the female are the gonads, okay, which play as an endocrine gland. So let us understand each of the endocrine gland and their functions and how they support our body. First, we'll start with hypothalamus. So if you remember the structure of the brain, we were talking about forebrain. In forebrain, we came across a structure called as diencephalon, right? So in the diencephalon, at the base of the diencephalon is your hypothalamus, okay? So when you see hypothalamus, hypothalamus has a very elaborate control and coordinative system on different parts of our body. Okay, so that means it regulates a very wide range of body functions. Okay, so what is special in hypothalamus? Hypothalamus, it contains a separate group of cells called as neurosecretory cells. Neurosecretory cells are also called as nuclei. Okay, so these neurosecretory cells of the hypothalamus, they produce and synthesize certain types of hormones. Among these hormones, you can call them, okay, you can categorize these hormones into three groups. Those are releasing hormones, inhibitory hormones, and other one is androgens. Okay, so somewhat like these hormones act like androgens. Okay, so this is about it. So let us see each of these hormones and their function. When you talk about releasing hormone, so releasing hormone are group of hormones which acts on pituitary glands. Okay, when they act on pituitary glands, they make these pituitary glands secrete. Okay, if you want, for example, see, there is one hormone called as gonadotrophic releasing hormone. So what does gonadotrophic releasing hormone do? Gonadotrophic releasing hormone will go on act on the anterior pituitary. Okay, GnRH produced by the hypothalamus will go and act on the anterior pituitary. When it goes and act on the anterior pituitary, now what does anterior pituitary do? It will release two of the gonadotrophins called as FSH and LH. Okay, are you understanding? So hypothalamus, as it releases the GnRH, which is a releasing hormone, it acts on the anterior pituitary to produce its gonadotrophins such as FSH and LH. Similarly, take another example. Other hormone is called as inhibitory hormone. Inhibitory hormone, for example, it inhibits the secretion of the pituitary. That means there is a hormone called as somatostatin. So this hormone, when it is produced by the hypothalamus, it goes and binds to the pituitary and asks the pituitary to stop producing growth hormones. Okay, it stops producing growth hormone, that is anterior pituitary. Okay, so now other type of hormone is oxytocin and vasopressin. So these both hormones are produced by who? Hypothalamus. And pituitary, what does it do? It goes and stores this hormone. Okay, so this is about oxytocin and vasopressin. So while we are talking about pituitary gland, we'll talk about the functions of oxytocin and vasopressin. Okay, so let us go to another endocrine gland, that is called as pituitary gland. Okay, so where is pituitary gland present? Pituitary gland is present within the skull in a region called as sella turcica. Okay, sella turcica is a region where your pituitary glands are present. And where is the pituitary gland exactly? So if you see, this is the hypothalamus. Okay, so this is the hypothalamus. You can see to the base of the hypothalamus, there is a stalk-like structure that is arising from the base of hypothalamus, and this stalk-like structure attaches the bulged portion, okay, called as pituitary gland. Okay, so now this is a pituitary stalk. Okay, the pituitary stalk holds the two pituitary glands. So if you see the parts of pituitary gland, you can see there is one portion that is in the yellow, other portion that is in the orange. So this pituitary gland can be divided into two important regions. One is anterior pituitary. Okay, so what is anterior pituitary? The one in the orange is the anterior pituitary. The one in the yellow is the posterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary is also called as adenohyphosis. Okay, it is called as adenohyphosis, whereas the posterior pituitary is also called as neurohyphosis. Okay, so remember anterior A, so adeno anterior. adenohyphosis and neurohyphosis. So if you see adenohyphosis, you see, so this is the adenohyphosis. Okay. So if you see, there is a very thin portion that is at the base of the adenohyphosis, and this is called as pars intermedia. So again, your anterior pituitary can be divided into two important regions. One is pars distalis and pars intermedia. Usually pars distalis is called as anterior pituitary, whereas still we divide this into pars distalis and pars intermedia because there is one very thin region called as pars intermedia or intermediate region or middle region. So this region is almost fused into the distalis region, but still we can differentiate. Okay. So you can see here, this is the hypothalamus. Okay. So this is the pituitary stalk. And here you can see, this is the pars distalis. This is the pars intermedia. Okay. And this is the pars to, okay, wait, pars intermedia, pars distalis. And then you have posterior pituitary. Okay, fine. So let's go to the pars distalis. So we'll stop talking about the anterior pituitary. Okay, so pars distalis is mostly anterior pituitary. Do you understand? So now pars distalis, they are, they're usually called as anterior pituitary, and they produce the following hormone. Okay, so the function of pars distalis is to produce the following hormone, though they are: first one is somatotrophin or growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid stimulating hormone, okay, adrenocorticotrophic hormone, follicular stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone are the different types of hormones that are produced by your pars distalis. Okay, so now whenever you have your anterior pituitary, let us say that your anterior pituitary okay, or pars distalis region is not functioning properly. So one of the hormones we'll take as an example, such as growth hormone. So this growth hormone, whenever it is not regulated, that means if its volume or the amount of growth hormone produced is very, very high, so that will lead to certain physiological changes. What are those changes? If your growth hormone is secreted, okay, in a very high volumes, it leads to a condition called as gigantism. See, this guy is 8 feet 8.1 feet long. Okay, so he is the tallest man on the planet. Other one is the opposite of it, called as dwarfism. Okay, in dwarfism, it leads to stunted growth. Okay, due to hyposecretion of growth hormone. Hypo means less secretion of growth hormone. Whereas if the same growth hormone is secreted in a very large volumes in the middle age, it leads to a condition called as acromegaly. So what happens in acromegaly? You can see that there is a disfigurement of the face, and it leads to severe complications in different parts of the body, and it leads to premature death. So whenever it is diagnosed early, it is easy to treat the disease. If it is undetected, okay, if it is not treated or detected very early, it can lead to death. Okay, so the property of this disease is you cannot detect it for many, many years. So your great Kali is also an example for gigantism. Okay, next one is the prolactin. So we talked about growth hormone, right? So now it is prolactin. Prolactin is the hormone that is usually very active after the delivery of the baby. So the job of the prolactin is it enhances the growth of mammary glands, and it helps in differentiation of alveolar cells that produces milk. Okay, next one is thyroid stimulating hormone, or it is also called as TSH. So the thyroid stimulating hormone, that means it goes and acts on the thyroid glands, and it makes it to stimulate the thyroxine hormones. Okay, so next one is adrenocorticotrophic hormone. So it goes and stimulates the secretion of adrenal hormones, okay, which are of steroidal, okay, which are steroidal hormones, and it acts on adrenal cortex region, and it produces some of the corticoids such as glucocorticoids. Okay, that is about ACTH hormone. Okay, so hold on. Yeah, ACTH hormone. So next one is follicular stimulating hormone. See, follicular stimulating hormones, you remember that we talked about GnRH, that is gonadotrophic releasing hormone produced by the hypothalamus. It goes and acts on the anterior pituitary, I told you. Yes, so it produces two types of these gonadotrophins called as follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Both this follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone are produced in both males and females, and they have a specific function. So let us talk about follicular stimulating hormone. In males, what does it do? So this hormone, along with androgens in the sense, androgens in male is testosterone. So it combines with the testosterone and it helps in the formation of sperms, or it is also called as spermatogenesis. Whereas in females, the same follicular stimulating hormone helps in the development of ovarian follicles. So ovarian follicles are certain bodies, okay, which look like this. So within these follicles, you can see that there is this egg that is developing. So as the follicles are formed, they are called as primary follicles. And as they mature, they turn Graafian follicle, and it is also called as mature follicle. So within this, as the follicles are developing, the egg is also developing. Okay, that means it is becoming a oocyte. Understood? So this is about in females. So let us talk about luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone in males, it acts on the gonads and certain cells of the gonads, and it helps in the production of androgens such as testosterone in males. Whereas in females, the same luteinizing hormone, it helps in maintenance of corpus luteum. Okay, what is corpus luteum? You can see this. I told you about Graafian follicle, which is a mature follicle which has an egg. So once the Graafian follicle ruptures, it liberates the egg. You can see it liberates the egg, and the remnants, that is the remaining parts of the Graafian follicle, they combine together to form an endocrine body called as corpus luteum, which produces progesterone. So if this endocrine body has to form, luteinizing hormone is necessary. Okay, that is called as corpus luteum. Okay, so we will talk about the hormone regulation when it comes to the gonads. So let us skip this part. Next one is pars intermedia. So I told you about pars intermedia. See, it's almost fused to the pars distalis. Okay, it's almost merged with it. So the pars intermedia produces a hormone called as melanocyte stimulating hormone. So MSH is a hormone, okay, which acts on the cells that produces melatonin. So it goes and acts on the melanocytes, and it produces melanin pigment. That is why you have a skin killer. Okay, more melanocyte stimulating hormone, more melanin pigmentation. Okay, and then more darker you become. So this is about MSH. Okay, next one is the neurohyphosis, which is the posterior pituitary. So posterior pituitary has a function of storing two of the hypothalamic hormone. One is the oxytocin, other one is the vasopressin. Okay, now what is the function of oxytocin? So during the delivery, okay, when the delivery of a baby is happening, now what happens? The baby within the uterus have to contract so that the baby is pushed towards the vagina and the baby is delivered. So if this contractions has to happen, it has to be very, very powerful contractions. So when oxytocin is released, it acts on smooth muscles such as the uterus of the female, and it creates this parturition contractions. So whenever these contractions happens, so that leads to the delivery of the baby. Okay, and the second one is it also helps in milk ejection. Okay, if the milk that is sucked by the baby has to come to its mouth, so oxytocin is responsible. Okay, so next one is vasopressin. Vasopressin, we have heard about vasopressin when we are talking about the functions of kidney. Vasopressin is also called as antidiuretic hormone. That means it will not let you urinate. Correct? No. So what is vasopressin doing? It acts on different parts of your body for the reabsorption of water as well as electrolytes, especially the distal convoluted tubules of the kidney. So whenever it allows the kidney for more reabsorption of water, so it prevents the loss of water through urine. Okay, so whenever a person has the deficiency with ADH or antidiuretic hormone, so they cannot conserve water. Usually they go under excess dehydration, right? Because the water loss is very, very high. So that is this type of disorder is called as diabetes insipidus. Okay, this is called as diabetes insipidus. Okay, fine. Next gland is pineal gland. It's a very, very interesting gland. It is the smallest endocrine gland. It is also called as the third eye of human being. Okay, so it is located in the dorsal side of the forebrain. So it secretes a hormone called as melatonin. So what are the functions of melatonin? Basically, for you to differentiate between day and night, sleep and wakefulness, okay, and your metabolism, pigmentation, your menstrual cycle, and so many of the homeostatic functions are held by your pineal gland. So your dream state, your conscious state, and your ability to, deep sleep, it's all because of the pineal gland. and even the power of imagination for you is coming from pineal gland. Okay, so now usually whenever there is the deficiency of melatonin, so you will lead to insomnia, where you have the difficulty of sleeping. Okay, fine. One second. Okay, students. So if you have any doubts, please, you can use the chat box, the students who are in the YouTube. I hope you are able to listen this lecture properly. Fine. So the next gland that we have to talk about is the thyroid gland. So it is a quite important gland. Okay, it has too many functions. Okay, thyroid gland has too many functions. So we have to discuss about it in detail. Okay, so thyroid glands, where are they present? See, when you look at the thyroid glands, you can see that it is made up of two lobes, and it is one of the largest endocrine gland that is present in our body. So if you see the location of our thyroid gland, you can see that there is a trachea. Okay. So alongside the trachea, the thyroid gland is situated. So if you see the thyroid gland, okay, you can see that the two lobes of the thyroid gland are having, okay, a region where it is connecting. Okay, you can see that the left piece and the right piece are interconnected. So this interconnecting part of the two lobes of the thyroid gland, okay, is one second, is called as isthmus of the thyroid gland. Okay, so this particular region, the isthmus, is composed of connective tissues. Okay, so this connective tissues. So now if you see the lobes of the thyroid gland, it is composed of two important two important structures. I will tell you. One is the follicles, other one is the stromal tissue. Okay, you remember the follicles that we talked about in ovary. So these are some spherical bodies which are composed of cells around them. Okay, these are called as follicular cells. So these follicular cells, in the center, they create a cavity. Okay, so there is a cavity in the center of the follicular cells. Understood? So these follicular cells, they secrete the thyroxine hormones. So what are the different hormones that are secreted by these follicular cells? The follicular cells secretes two different types of thyroid hormones. One is the T4, other one is the T3. Okay, what is T4 and T3? First one is called as thyroxine, or it is also called as tetraiodothyronine. Tetra means 4, that's why we write T4. Other one is triiodothyronine, or it is also called as T3. Okay, these are the two important hormones. Okay, and the other one is called as TCT. We'll talk about this. That is called as thyrocalcitonin. Okay, so now coming to these two hormones, that is the T4 and T3, that is tetraiodothyronine as well as triiodothyronine. They have the following functions. Okay, so these two hormones, they are basically responsible for regulation of BMR, that is body basal metabolic rate. Next one is physical and mental and sexual development. Okay, and other functions also include, okay, so for example, formation of red blood cells, control of metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Okay, and maintain water and electrolyte balance. So these are the functions of this T3 and T4. Okay, so in case other hormone is called as thyrocalcitonin. So this is a hormone that lowers the blood calcium levels. Remember this. Okay, so for all these hormones production, iodine is very, very necessary. So that is, iodine is used for the production of thyroid hormones. Fine. So whenever there is a defect in the thyroid gland, that leads to the undersecretion of thyroid hormones. So that leads to a condition called as hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism is also called as goiter. So what is the deficiency of goiter? You can see that there is a lump, okay, or the swelling of this thyroid gland near the neck region. So the thyroid gland becomes enlarged due to the deficiency of iodine, and it leads to goiter. Okay, so what happens in humans? Let's say in adult women. So if there is hypothyroidism, that leads to irregularity in menstrual cycle. Okay, if they have hypothyroidism during pregnancy, it leads to a lot of different defects in the baby. So the baby will start showing stunted growth, mental retardation. Okay, this stunted growth is also called as cretinism and mental retardation, low intelligent quotient, abnormal skin, okay, deaf mutism. So these are some of the things that you can expect of a baby who are born to hypothyroid mothers. Okay, so sometimes what happens, the same thyroid gland, because of some mutation, because of the some of the physiological effects, okay, so they can develop some nodes which can lead to cancer. So whenever this happens, there is excess secretion of this thyroid gland that leads to hyperthyroidism, okay, or it is also called as exothalamic goiter or Graves disease. So during this hyperthyroidism, the people who suffer from this have enlarged thyroid gland. You can see that their eyeballs are protruded out of their eye sockets or eyeballs. Okay, increased BMR rate, weight loss, and weakness are some of the causes, or some of the symptoms of hyperthyroidism. Okay, so next gland that we have to talk about is the parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland is it's a part of thyroid gland because it is present on the thyroid gland. You can see that parathyroid glands are like nodes which are present in 4 in number, 2 in each. See, you can see this so clearly. You can see the isthmus region, correct? So you can see 2 in each lobe. Okay. So now if you see the parathyroid gland secretes a hormone called as parathyroid hormone, which is a peptide hormone. Remember this peptide hormone, steroid hormone, whenever we tell. So remember those. Okay, fine. So what is the function of a parathyroid hormone? The role of parathyroid hormone is to regulate the calcium levels. So how does it do? It increases the blood calcium levels by acting on 2 important parts of your body. One is the bone, other one is the kidney. What is it doing in the bone? So it goes and acts on the bone cells and it makes the bone cells disintegrate. So when the bone cells disintegrate, it becomes demineralized. Okay, and it releases calcium in the blood. Okay, and the other region is the renal tubules of our kidney, where it signals the kidney to absorb more and more calcium from the urine. Okay, thereby preventing the calcium loss. Understood? Now what happens? We studied about TCT, right? TCT hormone by your thyroid gland, and now along with the TCT, the parathyroid gland, both of them combine together to maintain this calcium levels in our body. Okay, so this is about parathyroid hormone. Now next gland that we have to talk about is the thymus gland. Okay, thymus, we have studied about thymus when we talked about oh no, we didn't study about thymus. In second year we study about thymus. Okay, so now let us talk about thymus. The one of the things, interesting fact about thymus is when we are babies, the thymus gland is very, very big, and as we grow up, like when we come to puberty, it becomes very, very small. And from then on, as we age, the thymus becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it disappears. And as we die, as we are aging. Now, what is thymus? Thymus is a bilobe gland that is located just above your heart and below your sternum, that is the breastbone, right? In the ventral side. Now, if you see, the role of this thymus gland is to produce a hormone called as thymosin hormone. So it is a peptide hormone. So what is the function of this thymosin? Now you might have heard about lymphocytes. Okay, well, we're talking about body fluids and circulation. When we talked about lymphocytes, I talked about T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. You remember? So when you talk about T lymphocytes, we talked about maturation of T lymphocytes. If the T lymphocytes have to become functional, the reason why we call T in T lymphocytes is because T stands for thymus. So the T lymphocytes, which are formed in the bone, they migrate to the thymus gland for maturation. So this maturity occurs because of the hormone thymosin. Similarly, it also acts on the B cells and help them to produce antibodies. Okay, so this is about the thymus gland. So if for the people, generally what you can observe is as we age, the thymus become disintegrated and it becomes smaller and smaller and it almost disappears. You can see the size of the thymus gland as we newborn, 10-year-old, 25-year-old, 59-year-old, and 70-year-old. You can see that it becomes smaller and smaller. So that is why in older individuals, there is very low immunity. Okay, they have very low immune response and they become very, very weak. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Next gland is very important gland, that is adrenal gland. Okay. So adrenal gland is situated just on the anterior region of the kidney. One second. It is situated in the anterior region of the kidney and it is a conical structure. So if you see the adrenal gland, if you take the adrenaline gland and take a cross section, you can see that you can differentiate the adrenal gland into two important anatomical region. One is the outer region, other one is the inner region. The outer region is called as the cortex region. That is why we call it as adrenal cortex. Whereas the middle portion is called as adrenal medulla. Okay. So both of them have their own functions because they produce different hormones. Okay. Now, when it comes to adrenal cortex, they produce a class of hormone called as corticoids. Okay. So these corticoids are responsible for so many different functions. Okay. In our body. Okay. So usually adrenal cortex is so important whenever you have a deficiency of adrenal cortex hormones. Okay. It leads to the alteration in carbohydrate metabolism and you get get a lot of weakness, fatigue, as well as, it leads to a disease called as Addison's disease. Now, when we talk about the cortex, okay, the cortex produces corticoids, I told you, correct, right? So that happens because of the specialized cells that are present. So the corticoids, they are involved in carbohydrate metabolism and they are called as glucocorticoids, okay? So these glucocorticoids, they stimulate gluconeogenesis, lipolysis, and proteolysis, okay? So these functions are very, very important for the increased levels of glucose metabolism, okay? Next one is it also avoids the cells from uptaking amino acids, okay? It also acts on the cardiovascular system as well as the kidney functions. It helps in the RBC for production, okay? And it also have immune suppressing abilities. That means it lowers our immune powers by having an anti-inflammatory reactions. That means it reduces the swelling, okay? So it reduces the swelling. So this is called as anti-inflammatory reactions and it suppresses the immunity. And the next one is mineral corticoids. So mineral corticoids are the class of corticoids which participate in regulation of water and electrolyte balance in our body. Thereby, they maintain osmotic pressure as well as blood pressure. Okay. So one of the famous examples for mineral corticoids are aldosterone. Aldosterone is a mineral corticoid that helps in reabsorption of sodium and water and release of potassium from the renal tubules. Okay, potassium and phosphate from the renal tubules. Okay. Okay. Next type of corticoids is androgenic corticoids. Okay. So that means they have steroidal function. They are steroidal in nature. Okay. So what do they do? During the puberty, they help in some of the sexual characteristics, development in sexual characteristics. For example, development of axial hair, pubic hair, facial hair, okay, during the puberty. So that is about androgenic corticoids. Okay. So if you see the adrenal gland and take a cross section of it, especially in the cortex region, so you can see that the adrenal cortex is made up of three important regions. One is the inner zona reticularis, middle zona fasciculata, and outer zona glomerulosa. You can see here, okay, glomerulosa, fasciculata, and reticularis. Okay. So now these layers, along with other tissues, they produce corticoid hormones. Okay, so those are glucocorticoids, mineral corticoids, as well as androgenic corticoids. Okay. So as I said, whenever there is a deficiency of this corticoid hormone, it leads to alteration in the carbohydrate metabolism, acute weakness, fatigue, and this condition is called as Addison's disease. Okay. Fine. So coming to the secretions of adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla actually produces a class of hormones called as, okay, catecholamine hormones. So catecholamine hormones such as you have adrenaline and noradrenaline. You might have experienced the effects of adrenaline and noradrenaline, like when you're racing, okay, when your teacher points you out, okay, whenever you get into a fight, or when you're afraid, okay, or when you're stressed out. So now what happens? You are like completely pumped out, and then you start getting agitated, or your heart rate will increase, or you will get goosebumps on your hands. All this is because of these hormones. So whenever these hormones are rapidly secreted, they create an emergency situations. Okay, they create this emergency response. So that is called as fight or flight hormones. Okay, so these hormones, whenever they're produced, they create this following effects such as alertness, pupil dilation, okay, rising of hairs in your arms and legs, sweating, heartbeat increases, okay, and heart contraction power increases, and your respiration also increases. Okay, so now along with these effects, they also affect physiologically by increasing the breakdown of glycogen, thereby increasing the blood glucose level. They also stimulate lipids and proteins. Okay, breakdown of lipids and proteins. So this is about the hormones of adrenal and medulla. Now, when you talk about pancreas, so pancreas is a very well-known organ because of its, diabetes. Okay, a lot of people suffer from diabetes, and we know pancreas through it. Correct, no? So when we look at the pancreas, pancreas are a heterocrine gland because they perform both as endocrine as well as exocrine glands. So we are talking about endocrine system, so we'll stick to endocrine part of the pancreas. So endocrine part of the pancreas has two important parts. Okay, so these are called as islets of Langerhans. Okay, so in islets of Langerhans, endocrine part contains a very important cells called as islets of Langerhans. And if you see how much of islets of Langerhans are there in the pancreas, there are about 1 to 2 million islets of Langerhans are present, which is about only 2% of the entire pancreatic tissue. Now, in islets of Langerhans, you have two different types of cells. One is alpha cells, other one is beta cells. So this is alpha and beta, not A and B. This is alpha and the beta cells. So this alpha and beta cells, they produce the specific enzyme. For example, alpha cells produces glycogen, okay, and the beta cells will produce insulin. Okay, when we talk about glycogen and insulin, they are responsible for glucose balance or glucose homeostasis. Okay, what is glycogen? Glycogen is, look at this, hyperglycemic factor. Hyper means more, glycemia means sugar or glucose factor. It increases the blood glucose. So how does it do? If you want to increase the blood glucose levels, so this hyperglycemic hormone, it has to act on liver cells, okay, and it will stimulate, okay, glucogenolysis, okay, glycogen to glucose. So when it goes to glucogenolysis, it results in increase in blood glucose. Correct? No, it also stimulates, okay, gluconeogenesis in the tissues. Thereby, it also reduces the if the cells take away all the blood glucose, then the blood glucose will decrease, right? So that is why it will not allow the cells to uptake or cells to take glucose. Okay, it will reduce the glucose uptake in the cells and tissues and even their utilization. That is why glycogen is called as hyperglycemic factor. So what is glycogen doing? It goes and acts on liver by stimulating glucogenolysis, and it also stimulates gluconeogenesis, thereby increasing the blood glucose level. It also acts on other tissues, and stops them from utilizing the glucose. Okay. Next one is, So when you talk about insulin is a hypoglycemic hormone. So this is about insulin. So in insulin, what does it do? It acts on hepatocytes as well as adipocytes or adipose tissues. Okay, and it stops them, and it makes them to take more and more glucose from the blood. So as they absorb the glucose from the blood, it reduces the blood glucose level. Correct? No, the blood glucose level rapidly decreases. So okay, so that is why insulin is called as hypoglycemic hormone. Okay, and the role of it is it stimulates glucogenolysis, that is the conversion of the glucose to glycogen. Okay, so that is about insulin. For example, if some people lack insulin, they will become hyperglycemic for a very long time. That means they have more blood sugar because of the lack of insulin. Whenever you have lack of insulin, now what will happen? they are prolonged hyperglycemic, glycemic. That leads to several disorders such as hyperurination, thirst, weakness, formation of ketone bodies, etc. So this type of condition is called as diabetes mellitus. So that is why most of the people take insulin therapy. Okay, whoever are suffering from diabetes, they have the disorder in the pancreas. They are not secreting enough volumes of insulin. Okay, so the next one we have to talk about is the gonads. So gonads are of two types. One is the testis, other one is the ovaries. Testis in male, ovary in female. So they are the primary sex organs in the male when it comes to testis. Okay, there are pair of testes which are present outside the body in a sac-like structure called as scrotal sac. Okay, so if you take the cross section of the testis, you can see that the testis is divided into several compartments. Okay, so within these compartments are very highly coiled structures called as seminiferous tubules. There are coiled tubes called as seminiferous tubules, and between the seminiferous tubules there are interstitial tissues. Interstitial means, so if there is a tubule here, if there is a tubule here, the space between these tubules are filled by special type of cells, and these cells are called as interstitial cells. Okay, so these interstitial cells are also called as Leydig cells. So these Leydig cells produce androgens called as testosterone. Okay, so which is a steroidal hormone. Now, this androgen or a testosterone is very, very important for development of secondary sexual as well as primary sexual characteristics. So what are these characteristics? For example, maturation of body, okay, functioning of accessory sex organs like testes and formation of sperms, spermatogenesis, okay, and male sexual behaviors, okay, that is called as libido. Other one is growth of muscles, aggressiveness, growth of hairs, low pitch in the voice, okay, and then help in anabolism of protein, okay, that is construction of protein, and carbohydrates are the function of androgens. Okay, so most of the male sexual life, development of facial hair, development of pubic hair, all of them is coming because of the androgens. Next one is ovaries. Ovaries are the primary female sex organs, and they are pair in number. They are located in the lower abdomen, okay, beside the uterus. Okay, so their role is to produce egg by during menstrual cycle. So they produce one egg for every month. Okay, so that is one cycle is called as one menstrual cycle. So usually ovaries are formed in a special bodies called as ovarian follicles, and ovarian follicles are made up of follicular cells. So these follicular cells, they produce estrogen, which is a steroidal hormone like testosterone. So these, you can see, these are primary follicles, secondary follicles, tertiary follicles. They all produce estrogen. And after this follicle is produced, ovulation happens. Okay, and then this remaining cells of the follicles, they construct another body called as corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum will produce a hormone called as progesterone that helps in the maintenance of pregnancy. You can see here. Okay, so this progesterone, they help in strengthening the uterus. So if the egg is fertilized, then the progesterone will continue to produce until there is fetal development or the development of placenta. Okay, once the placenta is developed, the corpus luteum will degenerate and placenta will produce the progesterone. Okay, whereas if the egg is not fertilized, then there is no use of progesterone. So now the corpus luteum degenerates, and this lack of progesterone will lead to rupture of endometrium layer of the uterus, thereby leading to menses. So it's a very elaborate cycle, and you will learn very detailed in the second year. Now, what is the function of estrogen? Estrogen is responsible for basically all the secondary sexual activities and the development of female accessory sex organs, and development of ovarian follicles, production of egg, development of secondary sexual characters, and development of mammary glands, a low voice, high-pitched voice, okay, and sexual behavior is all because of the estrogen. And functions of progesterone, it supports pregnancy, as I said. It acts on the mammary gland also and stimulate the formation of alveoli for the production and storage of milk. So this is about ovaries. You can see here, people. Okay, so these are very, very important sources. Okay, this is a question, no problem. So next, I told you there are different parts of your body which are not endocrine glands, but they are acting like endocrine tissues or cells. Some of the examples are the walls of the heart, that is atrial wall of the heart. So the walls of the atria, they are responsible for, last time we talked about atrionatrial factor. Remember atrial natriuretic factor, that is ANF factor. What happens whenever there is too much blood pressure? Now this atria will recognize and produces ANF factor. When it produces ANF factor, now what will happen? It will lead to dilation. So this is constriction. Okay, see, the blood vessel is small. This is called as dilation. When the blood vessel dilates, there is more flow of blood, thereby what? It reduces the blood pressure. Correct? No? So remember this. That is called as atrionatrial factor, which is also a hormone. Next one is juxtaglomerular apparatus. So the JGA complex, or the JGA, which is present, okay, between your distal convoluted tubule and the afferent and efferent arterioles. Okay, here they have specialized cells which produces a peptide hormone called as erythropoietin. Erythropoietin is responsible for erythropoiesis, that is the formation of red blood cells. You can see here you have hematopoietic stem cells. They become, okay, the baby red blood cells. Okay, so you can say CFUS colony. Yeah, 1 second. Baby red blood cells they become, and baby red blood cells will become erythroblast will become reticulocytes. Reticulocytes will have nucleus, and they will become erythrocytes. So this process of formation of red blood cell is stimulated by a hormone called as erythropoietin. Sorry. So next one is gastrointestinal tract. They also produce a group of peptide hormones such as gastrin, secretin, okay, and cholecystokinin, okay, cholecystokinin. So when you talk about gastrin, it stimulates the gastric glands to secrete gastric juices such as HCl and pepsinogen. When it comes to secretin acts on the pancreas as well as your liver, okay, to secrete the water and the bicarbonate ions. Okay, so another hormone is called as gastric inhibitory peptide. It inhibits the gastric secretion. Next one is cholecystokinin. It stimulates the bile as well as gallbladder, okay, and even the pancreas to secrete its enzymes. Okay, so this is what are the hormones: gastrin, secretin, gastric inhibitory peptide. Next one is cholecystokinin. Okay, so now there are so many non-endocrine tissues that act as endocrine bodies which secretes growth factors. Okay, they are all essential for the normal functioning of our body, tissue repair, regeneration, etc. Okay, fine. Now coming to different types of hormone based on their nature. Okay, based on their nature, chemical nature, we can differentiate them into 4 different types. Those are peptide hormones, polypeptide hormones, protein hormones. So these are one class of them. Example: insulin, okay, glucogen, pituitary hormones, hypothalamic hormones, etc. When it comes to steroidal hormone, about steroid in biomolecules, we studied about steroids. There are 4 ring structures, correct, right? Those are called as cortisols, testosterone, okay, estrogen and progesterone. Okay, estridiol is estrogen. Okay, next one is iodothyronins. Those are called as thyroid hormones. Amino acid derivatives such as adrenaline and noradrenaline are the different categories of hormones and their examples. This is very important. Please try to remember the examples in the class of hormones. Okay, fine. The final part of this chapter is the mechanism of hormone action. So what is the mechanism of hormone action, people? So basically we have 2 different types of hormones. Okay, one, the hormone which can enter inside the cell. Second, hormone which cannot enter inside the cell. So what are these 2 different types? See, our cells are made up of, this is the cell, isn't it? So this is the cell. So the cell is made up of plasma membrane. What is the nature of the plasma membrane? It is a lipid bilayer membrane. What is on the outside of the plasma membrane? Hydrophilic end. What is in the inside of the plasma membrane? Hydrophobic ends. Correct? No. So now, if your hormone is hydrophilic. Okay, it is hydrophilic. That means water loving. Do you think that this hydrophilic hormone can enter into the plasma membrane? It does not enter. It is not possible. Now let us say that there is another hormone called as hydrophobic hormone. Okay. So that means what? It loves the water repelling nature. Can it enter the plasma membrane? Definitely yes. So based on the biochemical characteristics, we have two different types of hormone. One is the membrane bound hormones. Other one is the cellular hormones. Okay. So now these hormones, whenever they are released, they dissolve in the blood and they reach to the target site, and on the membrane or onto the inside organelles of the cell, they bind to a specific receptors. Okay, they bind to a specific receptor. What is a receptor? They imagine that your hormone is a key and your receptor is a lock. A particular key has to fit in a particular lock to open it, correct? No? Similarly, when these two combine very specifically to hormone receptor, they form a complex called as hormone receptor complex. That will induce a biochemical change in the target tissues and thereby regulating the physiological or metabolic factors. Okay, as I told, there are two types of hormones. One is membrane bound receptor hormones. Other one is intracellular receptor hormones. What is membrane bound receptor hormones? These membrane bound receptor hormones are mostly hydrophobic. Example, protein hormones or follicular stimulating hormones. What do? They come and interact with the receptors on the membrane. You can see here, okay, receptor on the membrane. When they come and attach to the specific receptor, they form this receptor hormone complex and thereby generating a secondary messenger. So once this response is generated, they create a secondary messenger, and these messengers can be cyclic AMP or calcium 2 plus or IP3, etc. So once these are produced, they go and induce a specific biochemical change and thereby resulting in overall physiological responses. Okay, so that is called as membrane bound receptors. Next one is your intramembrane receptors. What happens in intramembrane receptors? Okay, this is about this. Okay, intracellular receptors. So here what happens, they are hydrophobic. They can directly enter into the plasma membrane. For example, estrogen, which is a steroid. Okay. Now what do? They go and act on the receptors which are present in the nuclear region. Okay. So they go and directly affect the nucleus region, thereby controlling the transcription and translation rate. That is your DNA, gene expression, they will modify. So when they increase or decrease the gene expression, thereby the hormone receptor complex is formed, and then the genetic expression will take place by the production of these gene byproducts. Okay, what is happening? The hormone will go and bind to the nuclear receptors. Okay, and thereby what do? They regulate the gene expression or chromosome function. So this regulation of gene expression or chromosome function happens because of the interaction of hormone receptor. Okay, hormone interacts with receptor and they form a complex with the genome, and thereby this particular hormone is synthesized or a particular biochemical action is induced. Okay, you can see hormone receptor complex stimulates gene formation of mRNA, production of protein, and physiological response is taking place. So this is about intracellular hormones. Thank you, students. We conclude this lesson, and please revise once again and remember all the examples and all the classes of hormones, their functions, deficiencies, and diseases. So this might come very helpful and very handy in your examination. Okay. Okay. If you have any doubts, you can put it in the chat box. All right, students, I will end the session now. If you have any doubts, you can carry on to the next class, or you can drop a message on the chat box. Okay. Thank you.